So, as you may have already seen on my channel, I'm quite a fan of flight simulation, and I have been for the last 5 or 6 years, ever since a young age. However, up until now, I've always had to use the same system, although high-end, at least relatively, as I use for work and school purposes, which is a real awkward pain because whenever I want to do any flying I have to dig out the hardware and reset it up again. However, following up now from, as of about 2 months ago, finally redecorating this room, our final room in the house, with my situation I was promised by my parents to be allowed to have it as a dedicated flight simulator room. As you can see, it's not fully decorated yet. There's still things like a radiator needing to be put back in and needing furniture to be added. However, though, I have got my own act together and I have set up this. Following the news that I was going to have this set up, I obviously knew I needed to get some parts for it, in addition to what I'd already had. However, though, I had initially considered the possibility of using one large TV screen for the purpose. However, following some research, it turned out that that's not ideal because it doesn't provide a great experience, and that rather a better bet is using 3 monitors. So, following further research, learning how to do that, because I had no knowledge beforehand, I went and ordered the parts in sort of mid-June time. They arrived towards the end of June, and then basically, given that it's early August now, I spent about a month or so doing the initial setup process. That said, I didn't have most of this shelf area that's supporting all the flight simulator hardware wasn't here. It was only this surface up until this line, because although we don't know what's in there, it's probably pipework. That is simply part of the house, and so I had the 3 monitors, which has just enough space on it for, plus half the computer, the other half being supported by an office chair, set up here for about a month or so. In that time, after I had first backed up various work documents and pictures and that sort of thing, data, etc., which I now have running on a new low-end system which I plan to use for work purposes, particularly when school starts up again. I went about doing a fresh installation of Windows and Flight Simulator X and getting all my add-ons installed, getting it tweaked and running perfectly because I use a lot of stuff and there's a lot to be done. The reason for doing that was just to make it a fresh installation for a fresh setup, so it's running at its optimum. And then that was finished towards the end of July. It took me roughly about a month to do, in and around other things. And then as of a few weeks ago, we started work with the help of my dad to build an extension to the shell from a simple bit of MDF that came from Homebase and a few metal brackets and other lumps of wood. We built a shelf here that I could use to support my other hardware. That was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and as of maybe a week ago, the final coat of paint had dried and I was able to set all the hardware up. Now that is me 100% done and I'm ready to start getting back into flying again. Really happy with it. However, I'm just going to give a brief tour of the various parts and the various features, starting with the monitors. These are again, following more research, it turned out that these were the ideal monitors for using with Nvidia Surround, because although they have, obviously when you put them together, as I think as of now is unavailable, they still have the black bars, which are a little bit detracting. These are bezel-less Acer H236HL bids, which, following recommendations, are the ideal monitor for gaming. They're also IPS panels, so they provide a decent colour. The 3 of them are then connected to, obviously, the computer over here using various ports on the graphics card, which, although the graphics card was upgraded, I went from an ATI Radeon 5750 to a GTX760. The rest of the parts are unchanged. It's not a monster computer, it's not i7-like or overclocked even, but rather it's an AMD FX4170, which is 4.2 GHz and quad-core. The GTX760 is a decent card, and I'm using, as you perhaps can see here, probably quite with difficulty, I'm using the 2 DVI, the DVI-I and the DVI-D ports, plus a simple HDMI cable, through various adaptive cabling and adapters that plug into the card to connect up and power the 3 monitors. As you can see, there's a lot of cables and in very small space. So although it's still a bit of a mess, I've tried my hardest at cable managing it. I've just used blue tack and various cable ties. It doesn't do too bad a job because from my viewpoint when flying, it's hardly visible any of the cables. The system also has 8 GB of DDR3 RAM, a 1 TB hard drive, which I have in 2 partitions, one which runs Windows files and the other to store other files that are sort of created as a result of flight simulations, such as flight videos I might produce later on and flight pan files. There's not much else to that other than it's a new case though. I upgraded to this case because it had more fans, and there's nothing really of much interest to it except for this switch here, which allows me to change the case lighting. It's just a gimmick, a bit of a novelty. There's not much purpose to it, just a bit of a waste of power. However, at night it is somewhat useful to be able to look inside. Has additional fans that I've added, so the cooling is pretty decent to keep particularly the processor cool when running Flight Simulator. And it's kind of ideal that I've got it set up right next to this window, so especially on a cold day like today, there's a good stream of cold air coming into the front-facing fan. I should say that each monitor, although expensive, each monitor was £150, so that was a total of £450 to get the display. Although expensive, I do believe that it was worth paying for the quality. The cheapest place I could find was eBay, and I would recommend them because the shipping was relatively quick. Then the other stuff that was new with this setup was this Logitech speaker system. The name of it evades me, however though it's a 3.1 system, I think that's what it's called, because it has a subwoofer as well as 2 satellite speakers. This one is connected into the sound card on the motherboard at the back of the computer, and the 2 of them connect into the subwoofer down here. That cable runs along to the left speaker up there, where it provides the sound there. And the final thing that was new with this, really, were the keyboard and mouse. It's not a particular gaming hardware brand. If I am honest, it is literally cheapo China stuff. It's only cost me £30 for the 2 of them in a bundle, and it's not a recognised brand. However though, it does look half decent and it does the job. There've been no problems except for the fact that it's a US layout keyboard. The final thing of note is the Flight Simulator hardware itself. As you can see, as I already had, I've got the yoke, the 2 throttle quadrants, rudder pedals and the various panels. The panels, as any owners of the Cytec stuff might know, they don't have great compatibility with most add-on aircraft. Only very few. I found the Coronado aircraft are quite good with them, but other than them, it doesn't work well. So through the use of SPAD, which is the Cytec Panels Advanced Driver, and Linda, which is a program that uses LUA files, I don't really know much, but I've set up myself. I use LUA files to create custom commands. I've been able to get them working and compatible with most, but by no means all aircraft. That's certainly the case of the switch panel, and on the multi-panel the various functions on the right, like the trim, the auto throttle switch and the flaps. However, the autopilot feature, although it works nicely on default aircraft, not many add-on aircraft will support those. It's very difficult for those to be mirrored in the cockpit of the aircraft. Obviously existing 2 throttle quadrants. I have the changeable tops for them, so depending on the type of aircraft being flown I can change those. At the moment it's configured for a 2-engine prop aircraft. And the rudder pedals are down here as before. However, the only difference is that for the first time, and it gives me a notable difference, these are screwed into the pile and possibly also the floorboards of the floor. So when applying pressure they don't move at all, they're completely sturdy, which is nice to have for the first time. It means I don't need to worry about them sliding around over the floor. And that's it for that, except for the fact that as you probably noticed, I have my existing iPad that I already had running here. Below it is just some of this protective matting that I put on the surface of the yoke so that I can place the iPad down without scratching it. I intend to use this for flight planner, no, sorry, not flight planners, charts, navigational charts and airport charts as I fly, because for various websites, charts and navigational information for basically any major airport in the world, even a lot of airfields, is freely available on the internet. And in addition to that, when I'm flying the 777, the PMDG 777, which is my favourite aircraft at the moment, and obviously one I hope later in life to fly in the real world, I'm using Virtual Avionics 777 Remote CDU app, which through software running on the PC allows you over the Wi-Fi network. If I connect, it won't work because I'm not flying the aircraft, but it allows me to control the FMC of the aircraft through the touchscreen interface of a flight management computer on here, rather than fiddly using the mouse to click around buttons. That's rather useful. I also have this second iPad, which later on, because the existing larger iPad was too big and it obscured the view of the monitors, I purchased this recently at a relatively cheap price. It's an older generation iPad mini, the lowest spec, and I use that to run an app by position games called FSX Follow, which again also through supporting software on the computer allows me to see the position of the aircraft in the simulated world on a real world map, which is a really useful feature. There's not a great deal more to add, other than to tell you that, well, the various add-ons that I have running, as you can probably make out, I'm using Orbix's global scenery in addition to Vector, which adds real world roads, golf courses, etc. It adds a really realistic effect. It looks so much better than the default scenery. Also using Real Environment Extreme Texture Direct 4, which is powered by Active Sky Next, the real world weather engine. Mainly got that recently, upgraded from Opus, because the PMDG 777's weather radar supported it, and that's really good. That works really well. I'm also using, well, many add-on aircraft. This is the Real Air Duke, but I have a lot of PMDG aircraft, some of the Captain Sim ones, in addition to add-on airports. I've got quite a few of those, so generally I'm not flying into and out of default airports that much, which again just adds to the experience. Add-on traffic also, although I keep that very low, because if you have much of that, it puts a pretty intense hit on your system. So I should also talk about performance. Although it may not seem a great number of frames compared to most games, 20 to 30 frames per second is pretty decent for Flight Simulator, which is one of the most intense programs you can run on a computer. So therefore, when I get that most of the time with moderate slider settings, I accept that. I get much better performance when I'm running this in windowed mode, obviously. Although in not all positions, only some situations, going from running it on just a single monitor to all three does, well, causes my frames to probably halve, which is understandable because of the fact the graphics card's got a power 3 times the number of pixels. However, it's not always noticeable in all situations. I don't know why that is, but it's a bit strange. That said though, generally yes, performance is flyable and it's not bad at all. You finally note out that these aren't the default Flight Simulator colours. I'm running the shader mod called Sweet FX, which takes a good day or two to get it all set up exactly as you want, because there's so many things to play with. But I'm pretty happy with the colours. They look pretty realistic. If I press scroll up on the keyboard, that's what the default colours look like. That's what it looks like with the mod applied. Final utility is the use of software called Easy.Camera, which it's an interesting one. It allows you to create customized views. I have them, as you can see here, assigned to buttons on my throttle quadrant, the various views. it adds a lot more to the experience. It makes it a hell of a lot more immersive. However, though, whilst I would recommend it, be prepared to spend a very, very long time getting it set up for every single aircraft you own. It took me at least 2 or 3 days to do. But it's pretty decent. So I'll just simply unpause this and show you some flying with it. I'm just stalling. It's not going to be particularly decent because I'm not sitting down on my chair. However, as you can see, it is flyable, especially when I pan across. Having the 3 monitors is invaluable, really. The final thing to add is that I'm also using, sort of, if you want to consider it one, sort of makeshift knee board, where through Professional Flight Planner X, the software, I can plan all of my flights and create this sort of briefing pack which gives information. So that adds to the experience. I would recommend it, since this is all aircraft data that you can use before planning flights. Not much to say about that. So overall, yeah, I'm pretty happy with this, and it's great fun, really. So if anybody's thinking about setting up a multi-monitor flight simulator home cockpit, I would strongly recommend it. Anyway, yeah, thanks very much for watching, and goodbye.